We're going to start a series of lessons over the next several weeks with a very important Old Testament figure, Moses. Moses.
Wait, Carmine, wait, Carmine, stop. I've got to tell you something.
We're kind of like in the middle of something.
But I really need to tell you something.
It's important.
It's really, really important.
Okay. Well,
It's kind of personal.
Gabriel, the fact that you like sausage on your pizza and Lily doesn't isn't really. I'm not seeing that as real important right now. We're in the middle of service here.
But it's pizza.
Gabriel, this is kind of an interruption. Okay, we'll talk about this later on. Okay, it'll be okay. All right. He gets pizza half. He gets sausage on half. Okay. That's crazy. Daniel coming in here and interrupting him with us talking about pizza. You know, sometimes life gets interrupted. Just like Daniel interrupted here this morning. You know, in the Bible, in Exodus, is a story of Moses, and it's the story of a beginning of a chapter or an era in the people of Israel. Now, the people of Israel have been living in Egypt for quite some time. They've been there for hundreds of years. As a matter of fact, after Joseph had gone to Egypt, and we studied Joseph quite a bit last month, the people of Israel remained there in Egypt for a long time, and they began to live among the Egyptians. They got jobs there in Egypt. They were living and serving the Egyptians there. And then in chapter 1 of Exodus, verse 8, everything changed. Everything changed. The verse says there in Exodus chapter 1, verse 8, a new king began to rule in Egypt. That's our verse today. A new king began to rule in Egypt. Why is that important? Well, you see, up until this new king came, everything seemed to be pretty good. The Israelites weren't living back home, but they were living okay. They were living fairly comfortable. They had learned to live among the Egyptians. They worked in among them. They served them. They had decent jobs. Everything was okay, and they flourished. More and more Israelites, more and more Jews were born living among the Egyptians. And then a change in leadership came. Now, you know, just a few months from now, here in the United States, we're going to elect a new president. We're going to have a change in leadership in our country as well. We go through that every 4 years or so in our country where leadership changes. But you see, in our country, leadership changes, but there's still a large government, and for most of us, life will sort of go on kind of the same thing. But this was not the case for the Jews. It seemed to teach us, when it studied that, there was a big change. There was a whole change in ruling families. There was a whole change in philosophy. Whereas the former king and the former leaders of Egypt sort of got along with the Jews, and they put up with them living in their midst and working and living there, and everybody was doing okay. The new leadership, the new king, he was threatened by all these Jews. He said there's too many of them. He said, matter of fact, there's so many of them that if we go to war, they might side with our enemies. And if this many people side with our enemies, we're done for. And so the new king changed everything, and he passed a law that said, you know what? There's too many of them, so here's what we're going to do. When these Jews have babies, if it's a baby boy, we're going to throw it in the Nile River. What lived in the Nile River? Crocodiles lived in the Nile River. We're going to throw the babies to the crocodiles, and if they're girls, we'll let them live. But if they're boys, we're going to get rid of them. How horrible that is. What a horrible thing, isn't it? Then can you imagine if you were the Jews? All of a sudden, everything changed. What happened? Everything was fine. We were doing great. We were working. We're having a good time here in Egypt. And everything changed. Their life was abruptly interrupted. They didn't know what to do. And that very thing happened when Moses was born to his mother. She knew that the law was passed that if it was a baby boy, Moses was going to get tossed in the Nile River and die just like all the other baby boys. didn't want that to happen. So it says she hid Moses away. And she took care of him and kept him quiet. And she did that for about 3 months. But babies do something that sometimes is rather irritating. And it's going to make it very difficult to hide a baby. What is that? Peter said it. They cry. And it's kind of hard to hide a baby when they cry, isn't it? And so Moses' mother had a predicament on her hands. She had this baby. He's going to start crying. He's going to be found out. What is she going to do? We'll get to that back in a second. Let's go back to this whole life being interrupted thing. I'm aware of the fact that sometimes our lives get interrupted in some pretty big and significant ways.